Now joined by the insiders, Chris Johnston and Pierre LeBrun. Guys, Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid play together down the stretch in Game 1. It sparks a comeback win. Pierre, what are the chances we see the two stars together again to start Game 2?
Yeah, I don't think they probably start the game together. I think the trend that has developed here in these playoffs and really in the last couple of years under Chris Knobloch, it's break glass when you need them, right? And he loves to do it in the middle of a game when he needs to change momentum, and that's what happened in Game 1. But he doesn't like to do it for long stretches in a series. I think at the end of the day, he'd prefer to have Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid center their own lines. I think it brings the best out of the wingers around them. That's what he said on this day. So I don't just think it, he said it. But, you know, when I talked to a rival Western Conference coach who said it's so hard to defend when they load up 97 and 29, but over a long stretch of a series, it would actually simplify their defensive game if they stuck with that. So it's actually the fact that you don't know when it's coming. I think it's why it's so effective for the Edmonton Oilers.
Well, and one of Draisaitl's goals in Game 1 comes when he wasn't with McDavid, the one early in the game. And then, of course, the overtime winner is when they're on the ice together. And I think, you know, it's so important for the Oilers to have Draisaitl performing in this series. One thing that might be lost a little from last year's final is that Draisaitl's been such a great playoff performer, but he wasn't healthy that time around. Didn't score at all, actually, in the Cup final last year. And so having him break through, I think, is such a confidence boost for this team. Obviously, a huge driver of success. And look, I mean, the Oilers are a loaded team beyond these two guys. I mean, the superstars are in their own category, but they've got all kinds of experienced players behind them. Guys like Arvidsson scoring in this game, Kasperi Kapanen and others. And so, you know, I think the mix right now allows the Oilers to do a little bit of both, depending on what Knobloch's feeling.
Kapanen, in particular, feels like he's having a moment right now, and he's the second member of his family to make it to the Stanley Cup final. You spoke to his dad, Sammy Kapanen. What's he thinking about what Kasperi's doing right now?
Well, pretty emotional for him. He was back home in Finland watching Game 1, and you know he remembered his first Stanley Cup final game. He had 2 assists, and the Carolina Hurricanes at that point won in overtime. On Game 1 here, it's Kasperi Kapanen having 2 assists with the Oilers winning. And look, this has been a tough road for this player. I mean, he felt like he was potentially at the end of his road as an NHL player when the St. Louis Blues put him on waivers this year. You know, he gets picked up by Edmonton, and he's found a home here. But even still, these playoffs began, and he was in the press box watching. But, you know, he got in, and he scored the overtime winning goal in round 2 that allowed the Oilers to get past Vegas. Sammy Kapanen said he thinks that's where things started clicking because he said, well, yes, at this stage of his career, he's a bit more of a defensive player. He still has that offensive, you know, ideas in the back of his mind. And he said he's an emotional guy. When things get going good, they get going good for him. And so, you know, right now things are going really well for Kasperi Kapanen.
Yeah, and CJ, that speaks to the depth of this team. This is the deepest Oilers team, I think, during this entire McDavid-Draisaitl run. Evander Kane is back. You know, you forget, again, last year at the Cup final, you mentioned Draisaitl was playing hurt. Kane was barely playing at all. He missed most of the final because he was injured. A healthy Evander Kane. He was a cannonball going in on the forecheck in Game 1, absolutely terrorizing Florida's defense. And so he's a major factor now in this series. And as a little sidebar to all that, Evander Kane and Matthew Tkachuk renewing acquaintances there in Game 1. Remember the Battle of Alberta in 2022. A lot of chatting back and forth between those two in Game 1. We'll see where that goes.
Oilers comeback not possible unless Stuart Skinner answers the bell. He was really good, especially down the stretch in this game. Chris, what's your sense of Skinner right now?
Well, we're looking for ways the Oilers might feel more comfortable the second time around. He mentioned last year when the Cup was on the ice before Game 1, he got googly-eyed, right? He said, you know, it almost had just shocked him to see it out there. And he said, this time around, I've seen it before. It was a little more comfortable throughout that game. And I think his performance from Game 1 maybe gets a bit lost. It's 3 goals against. You know, it's not a number of goal he wants to have. But remember, they had those 3 goals on the board early in the second period, did Florida. And he was able to shut it down, especially when the Panthers really brought the house in that second period. You know, gives his team a chance to tie it in the third, and obviously gets through overtime and doesn't let one in. So, you know, I think he's a player that has benefited from the experience, like a lot of his teammates, but he plays such a critical position. And, you know, between the ears is where I think Stuart Skinner really excels. We've seen him put tough performances behind him, and even within a game, he lets in 3 goals in the first 22 minutes, shuts the door from there.
I referred to Skinner as a box of chocolates early in this year, in these playoffs, because you never know what you're going to get. But the reality is he's on his best form right now, and the Oilers are just trying to keep that lightning in a bottle moment here with Stuart Skinner. Going into the Western Conference Final, everyone gave a check mark to the Dallas Stars as having the edge in goal with Jake Ottinger and how well he's played in his pedigree. Well, Skinner outplays him. No question the check mark before the Stanley Cup Final went to Sergei Bobrovsky, as it should. in the goalie matchup. And in game one, it was a saw. Bobrovsky was great. I didn't like the Arvidsson goal, but it was great otherwise. But Skinner held his own against him. That's all the Oilers need.
Right.
If they can get a draw against Sergei Bobrovsky from Stuart Skinner, they're going to win the Stanley Cup.
Well, Sam Bennett's going to do his best to try and unsettle Skinner. He certainly got to the crease in game one. I asked Chris Knobloch, the Oilers coach, how do you defend against Bennett when he's so good at creating chaos? He said, body position, earlier contact if you can, but sometimes there's just no answer if a player is going to do that.